Gather close.
Hi, it's Dan Harmon.
This is Andrew Guest.
Joe Russo.
And Anthony Russo.
One of the questions was who's doing this voiceover. Very good question, which I have to answer cautiously because it's the wife of our post producer Jake Ost. But it's important to note that I didn't know that when we hired her, and when we were he very cautiously then, out of a fear of unfairness and nepotism, revealed to me scientifically that it was her, and making sure it was okay if I didn't like her performance. But by that time, we were very happy. She did a great. What's Kate Blanchett? That's the impression she's doing, basically.
I thought it was Kate Blanchett. I was like, we got Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
And the Seattle Symphony did the opening.
That's right.
The song.
Oh, yeah. Ludwig did all this music live with a symphony. Andrew, I think this was your invention. Or was it McKenna?
It was McKenna. We were hung up on the opening scene to this.
Yeah, because I knew I wanted to spend the whole episode playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is the only thing I hadn't seen a D&D episode of a sitcom do. But I didn't. But then, what's your cold open? The network and studios perspective was, of course, have them just do a regular cold open like you did with the paintball episode, have them talking about hot dogs and in the cafeteria and stuff, and then create a reason to want to play Dungeons and Dragons, which is it's hard. And then we're sitting there over and over again going, how do you get that? Because the need needs to be so intricate to play the game, and then we're thinking, like Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of stuff to explain, there's a lot of distance to travel, it's an epic story. So we came up with this concept of emulating Lord of the Rings for the cold open.
Yeah, there was a lot. You had to set up this whole character, which we had and the origin of the Fat Neil character is sort of funny. It was just a throwaway joke in Chris's conspiracy theories. There was no actor for it, and then you guys put it back in Emily Cutler's script for Asian population studies. There was he spoke for the first time, and that was shooting when we were trying to break D&D, and Emily reported that Charlie Kuntz, who plays Fat Neil, did a great job, and that's why we were like, okay, we'll put him in an episode.
I didn't even know who Fat Neil was when we started.
The idea was it's loosely based on Saving Private Ryan. It's that concept of it's not the person who's the most important character isn't the most important character in the story. Mm-hmm. The goal is to save the life of someone who's more symbolic than humanly relatable. This is reason 7
You're
now
saying,
already while we're watching. It's like the voiceover, the epic nature of the cold open, and the special title sequence, which cost me another $4,000. That's 3 reasons now why the network and studio did not want this episode done. They hated it.
Wow.
Everything we're doing is the wrong thing to do with a sitcom episode.
And look at that. Look at that.
Yeah, that's.
I love Yvette's joke here. You don't want to talk about this hate crime?
That cold open was the most fun we've had shooting a cold open, I think, this whole season, because it was all style.
Yeah, it was. And so, Dan, you saying this is like Saving Private Ryan, that would make Chevy the...
Fill in the blank. America.
Not.
No one's going to say it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's not.
He's the Panzer tank.
The other interesting thing, so Adam Davidson was supposed to direct this episode, and Joe had done pre-production because Adam's wife was very pregnant, and he couldn't make the pre-production schedule. So the day of shooting, we still thought Adam was going to show up to set.
Oh, really?
And his wife delivered 2 baby girls, twins, that that we started.
Oh, wow.
And he named them Dungeon and Dragon.
Well, Adam would have done great because there's a lot of overlap there with Joe in terms of a cinematic sensibility. But Joe is the deadliest catch fisherman of this study room. This is another 4-day shoot, right?
Yeah, I think we did 4.5 on this one.
He knows how to make the Bering Sea give up its gold in this room. Every set has physical limitations to it. Nobody knows this set and these actors more than Joe Russo, so it worked out good for this episode. You did a lot of camera moves that I wouldn't have. There's specific stuff. Maybe when I see it, I could call it out. I was like, okay, see, I wouldn't have pictured it that way, but thank God you did that there. I think it has a lot to do with when Pierce is returning as the dragon and stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, we learned a lot from calligraphy. Spending an entire episode in the study room and just understanding, from a dynamic standpoint, that you have to do something with the camera in order for it to feel like you're there's energy and it's kinetic and something is happening in the space and it's not static and a bunch of people sitting around a table talking for 20 minutes. So I remember just as we were executing this, it's a very similar concept I applied to it that I did on calligraphy, where the camera got progressively more kinetic and calligraphy as the episode went on. It does in this, reflecting the game and the intensity of the game and what's happening in the game. And we had a techno crane for 4 days, and we just used that to move around the actors and sort of create dynamic shots to reflect what they were feeling in the game, because we knew everything was going to be happening in their imagination. How can we bring that out, and how can the audience experience that?
Yeah.
And in one move slices the throats of 3 charging goblins. The rest of the goblins run away.
Great job with the sword, Neil. You saved us. What would we have done if you didn't exist, huh?
Dial it back,
Right.
There he is. There's the technocrane.
And it's basically an homage or spoof to at the same time to Lord of the Rings and other fantasy films, and sort of overdramatic entrances for characters, and
Game of Thrones, if you will.
Yeah. Which was inspired by this episode.
Yes, I can't
Game of
believe
Thrones got
The books got written really quickly after.
Speaking of books, everything on the table is authentic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Most of it from my youth, because those books are graphically they just pop. They're very 70s and 80s. It's as you probably can see from other sitcoms that touch this topic. It's hard. You have to call the game Swords and Sorcerers and all this stuff. We got on the phone with Wizards of the Coast. I think Joe did you have a relationship with them?
I knew those guys previously, yeah.
And there's 20 lawyers on the phone from all sides, and then this nerd from Wizards of the Coast, I hope he's as proud to be called that as I am. He gets on. He sounds exactly like me. He's talking through his nose, mumbling, and he's a huge Community fan. And then I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan. And we're just talking back and forth.
So there's 20 lawyers listening to you guys. I thought it was really great when you guys did a thing. And
that was it. It was he had the power to pull that lever and just go, just do it. Just do it. It doesn't sound like you're bashing the game at all. It doesn't sound like you're glorifying or saying it's satanic or anything. It sounds like, because there's sexual content to it that was made. It was just great. It was perfect. He knew that the show had heart, and I knew that the game was important to kids, and and it was just
Without that conversation, this wouldn't have happened, because we were getting pushback. We tried to go through the normal channels, and legal. There, people were saying we don't. For example, we don't want Chang dressed up like that because that's called LARPing. That's live action role playing. We don't want people to confuse it. We don't want a character who's sexualized. We have to make. No one can seem like a nerd for playing it, and we're like, well, how do we do?
Yeah.
The folks who were representing Wizards of the Coast the lawyers were justifiably protecting the property.
So you knew somebody to make a connection to hook Dan up to talking to him.
Exactly. So we said, all right, let's just cut the lawyers out of it and let's talk directly to,
What I loved is that if you actually look what we're doing, we're really playing the game. Yeah. So that the game is being played, which is no other show has ever. I think there's an episode of the British IT Crowd where they play it. But
and there's Freaks and Geeks too, and it's like they're great stories, great episodes, and I didn't want to be derivative of them or bump with them. But in both of those episodes, the big difference is that the game itself is I don't want to say it's a joke. It's the joke is driven by the fact that the game is being played.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do an episode I'd never seen where the game is the backdrop for the story. Right. You are immersed in the game, and the story is taking place within the game. And you give a challenge like that to writers like Andrew, Megan, and McKenna. And this was I remember walking out of the room and coming in, and they had cracked the impossible to crack third act of this episode. Because how in the hell, having accomplished those goals, do you end this episode? How do you end the story within the story within the story?
Right. This is one of my favorite lines.
This is great.
Wait. He talks about his erection.
This is all great. It's this is the perfect. Your incredulity. I don't like being excluded, Jeff. Do you? Yes. It's so great.
This was the tipping point too for Pierce's character this episode.
Threatening me and talking to me like a kid, and giving me that look you give me like I can't get erections. What? Hey, Ben?
He's like, I can still get erections. It's this makes just total non-sequitur.
This was a function of sort of where he was as a character at this point in the season, but also, we were leaning towards or tipping towards Lord of the Rings, and and that Pierce's character is the villain of this piece.
We needed an antagonist, and you see how much it activates Joel here. I mean, this is one of my favorite performances because you with this a lot on the line. You care about what Joel's trying to get done. You want him to succeed, and this guy's getting in the way, and it makes you. That's one of my favorite lines. Is the he can't tell if he's being, and that's a Dan Harmon line that.
I can't literally read what you're trying to do
exactly.
here, so
I don't know
want
if
to say.
Pegasus or fake. I mean, and your performance there, where you're selling it, we are with you. It's great.
Well, what's amazing about it, not to blow my own show or anything, but what I love about this is that our character, our douchiest character, who's our protagonist, our most hair-gelled, most buff, most stylish character, who is the most of the wise guy in a ship of fools, the closest to David Spade that we have on our show, starts from the base of caring about human life and not wanting blood on his hands, which is even the character who is defined by his solipsism has that much compassion, knows that you're supposed to save human lives. You're not supposed to let people kill themselves for being fat.
Right. Well, and
we find out that you're riddled with flaws. That you, in fact, are the reason that you alone cannot solve this problem and stuff. But we don't, and that's a twist. But we start the episode not with people going, "Oh, he's fat. This is Dungeons and Dragons. I don't like it," and then having to play it and finding out this isn't so bad after all. It just starts with, "Okay, let's save this guy's life," right? Because that's what you do. Yeah. And I love that about our show.
But this is actually my favorite script of the season. And why I think the script is so good is because of the twist at the end of Act 2, which is that.
Watch the candy part.
Yeah.
It's just.
Is that I'll tell a story about Chevy in a second here, but but why I love the script so much is that it's got the depth to it that it's actually it's Jeff's character that started this whole thing in the first place.
Right. The stakes are
so he's a very complicated character.
Full of majestic pegasi. Finally.
But also the big challenge too was within the game. How do you twist the game? Does Chevy, because in the original concept, Chevy reveals at the end of the first act that he's a Dungeons and Dragons expert because he used to hang out with Gary Gygax, and
it used to be cool in the 70s. It was cool.
It was he played with Hugh Hefner at the Playboy Mansion. But it wasn't a story driver, and we were getting more organic ground covered with him just turning into a villain by jumping into the game with both feet. And so the big question became, well, in these movies, then the evil sorcerer, he has to encounter a new power, but it came to us over, it was at Andrew Guest's place. Me, McKenna, and Guest were doing another all-nighter, just three guys, one of us would nod off and the other one would pop a 5-hour energy and two would get 2 hours of sleep and the other one would keep typing. And it was sometime during one of those shifts that I came up with the concept of the module, you call those things, those little paperback things. Of course, you can buy those at the store. So, of course, he cheats. He goes and gets a nerd, an underling, to bring him the most powerful book in the world, which is the game they're playing, and cheats.
And that might have been 6 a.m. before our 11 a.m. table read. And I might have been a little scared. But then, Dan came up with it. It was great.
One of the most replayed things on YouTube.
Right.
People want to know what she's saying.
Okay. You both fall back exhausted, but still entwined.
Okay.
And Danny pretending to be tied up, okay, I'm no longer tied up. And I think Danny's performance in this, because Danny being the dungeon master, he's driving the whole story at the amount of dialogue that he had to say and communicate proper. I mean, it was astonishing.
This is Chevy, we actually sent him home. I don't know if you remember this, Andrew, but we sent him home and then brought him back around 9 o'clock to do this scene. And that may or may not really be wine.
I was going to say, knowing that that's the great way to get a drunk performance out of it. Give him an hour.
You should have said may or may not be a Pinot Noir or a Cabernet. I just think it's one of those.
I love his posture. I love that he's coming in. His hands are below frame, and it's as if he's handcuffed, like he's a prisoner.
He was really reticent at first, Chevy. He kept saying over and over, "I'm so mean in this episode. I'm so mean." And the pitch back to him constantly was, "Well, look, you're the villain of the episode. That's sort of we're embracing the mythology of these movies." And
it
then once he
wouldn't
got
work if he wasn't.
into it, he got into
Right.
it.
I think it's Chevy's. I think it's his best performance of. I mean, it's his
Definitely his
standout
funniest. I mean,
performance. It's so good.
Yeah, our motto on set was that this might be the funniest thing that Chevy Chase does in the next 10 years of his life.
But
That was the motto?
he says some pretty horrible things, and we're even on set. We brought this actor Charlie. We barely worked with him once before. We're having him on set, and this guy's ripping into him, and it was it was uncomfortable to be there for some of that. But and
It's bad
because of
enough
that-
for Charlie that he's auditioning for the role of Fat Neil.
Exactly.
And then to have this story written around him, I'm sure it's like the best and worst of worlds. But hey, that's those actors are, you don't get the job of performing on camera and making audiences believe you're a real person if you don't have something in your head that says this
That's
is
a
the greatest
great
thing in the
shot, yeah.
world.
Yeah, no, and he anchors this episode. If Charlie hadn't delivered, because we don't know, he's a sort of unknown
yeah.
quantity. If he hadn't delivered, this wouldn't have worked either.
Yeah, and he's fantastic. He's perfect as the he's believable as a human being, but you don't know him from Adam.
Mm-hmm.
He's great in this. He gives a really great performance. Grounds the whole thing. I mean, the episode really doesn't work without his performance.
Mm-hmm.
I love the turn where Chevy says now, and it's like all that stuff gets revealed. Oh, it's great.
Another thing we came up with, I think, on set, or maybe we talked about it just prior to shooting, was the sound. Using sound to reinforce the sequences. Because again, we wanted to use every tool we had at our disposal to bring the episode to life.
So we would split the difference. We would have our Mark Binder, who's a genius with sound. We did a special spotting session with him where we went through and talked about the possibilities. Do you want to hear the goblins running? Do you want to hear? And it's a case by case thing. You go through. You go, well, if you hear goblins chattering in the tavern, it's throwing me. It's like now we're doing a radio play and it's weird. Like there's just a fine distinction you draw between each case. Do you want to hear the arrow flying through the air? Does it sound enough like an arrow? Do you want to hear it hitting the tree next to her? You just use your guts and go through it and ride the line.
We ended up using mostly sound effects
Yeah.
for those sequences.
I mean, between
Stay away
Ludwig
from voices.
and Doug and Mark, I can guarantee with no fear of being wrong that in the realm of TV comedy, there is no show that to which sound is more important. There can't possibly be.
Well, there's been more than one occasion where we've heard these episodes with the final mix and the music in it, and typically you expect a 10 or 15% jump, and sometimes there's a 50% jump in the episode just from the sound work and the
Or with
in the score.
conspiracies, it's like a 70% jump, or it's beyond percentages to the point where it's not an episode of TV until Ludwig and Mark and Doug like finish their job.
It's the Greek chorus.
This is our Joe had to fight to keep Chevy quite as man. There was like one line that I wanted cut out. It was just too much, too far. So I think it was the go ahead, cry, baste your fat cheeks in tears of gravy. I it was always the spot where everybody always went, oh. And I mean, Joe was like, well, they're doing that because, it's
hitting the right nerve.
It's what's supposed to happen here. So I was like, you're right, okay, all right.
It was the most poetic line in the script to me. It's a really well written line, and if you either go for the jugular or you don't.
When we missed the line earlier, but when he gets this sort of Duquesne and they're like, what do you do? And they're like, I don't know, wipe my ass with it and throw it off a cliff. And it was just the perfect. Oh, it was so good.
Well, that's the great. It's like he's like a 6-year-old joining a game of Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
causing all of this havoc. But then he grows into this venerated old,
the greatest Dungeons and Dragons
corrupted,
player ever.
and he saves Neil's life, and that is why I didn't think we were going too far at the time. I think that this, in combination with the hospital episode, is what caused everyone to go, okay. I still though I go, yeah, but it's he's just an old dick, so you have an old dick in your family. I like you have these stories where he gets all cantankerous and he ends up saving the fat kid's life, and then you have the hospital episode. It's like he's trying to hatch these stupid schemes to get revenge on everyone, and it all falls apart. He gets his ass kicked and reveals that he loves Annie and Jeff. But I get it. Customer's right, and we will shore up Chevy's character.
There is
in
an
season
old
3.
adage that's your hero's only as good as your villain, and some of the best episodes of the season are because of the Chevy's antagonism towards the group.
Yeah.
The research, we just read the research recently. It does say one interesting thing, which is that they realize the need for a villain, but they don't believe Pierce as a formidable opponent of Jeff. I'm sure Chevy would love to hear that.
Oh my gosh.
Like they want Jeff to have an opponent, but Pierce they don't believe is an opponent. You know, they and I think so. It's like, well, okay, Grandpa Munster it is. That's what you want. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get Al Lewis.
And here's this great.
Yeah.
Hey, that was the best game I ever played in my life.
Don't mention it.
Want to play again next week?
Maybe.
Okay.
He should have just said yes. I always kick myself.
Really
for that.
lovely work by both of those guys in this
This is
episode.
amazing.
they did a great
And here's the great shot.
I was a little nervous about this. It's a little.
Good night.
So it turns into a Visa commercial from the late '80s, but I mean, it's okay. It's fine.
How could you possibly want giant ears over a tail? If you had a tail, people could always tell when you're happy.
Yes, but with giant ears, you can hear things from miles
Our
away.
tags are usually shot sometimes weeks after the episodes because
Yeah.
we're always behind schedule,
Yeah.
and the tags are the first thing that gets bumped. So I think this was shot. I think my brother shot this. It was shot a couple weeks later.
Yeah, and then there's moments of like the tags get triaged and they get banked and stuff. We gotta stop. We gotta bring our A game on the tags for season 3.
Yeah.